So we bought it on August 4th. It was fallow pasture. This is what it looked like. There were a few pecans on the prairie. That day, we had 20 inches of rainfall in a week. So it really defined the hydrology of the property for us. It's a wet prairie, and we did put in a little bit of drainage to help, but still there's a natural grade that keeps some of it wet. I knew I had to design a plan. I couldn't just jump in. So we divided the property up, put raised vegetable beds outside of our kitchen because we have no sun on our original property, 2.5 acres. It's wooded. I planted a 1-acre forest at age 60 to use as a windbreak on the north side, and then 3 acres of prairie restoration on the west side. So this is a crude drawing of my plan. My house is here. I guess I could use this. The vegetable garden is here. This is the forest on the north side, and this is the back prairie restoration. It's about 3 acres. Because I'm a scientist, I had to do some comparisons. I had to design reference areas. So this is my first reference area. It's unaltered. We did no planting, no seeding, and we mow it once a year. Reference area 2 is unaltered, no planting, no seeding. It's just the species that were there, but we burn it when we burn the restoration. And so this is the restoration. I love paths through the prairie. I love to be able to walk through it, to get up close and personal with whatever's in there. And then when the grasses fall over on the path, I can still get through it without any problem. They're about 8 feet wide. And we started out disking. Okay, I just told you about my reference areas. I'm going to tell you, when we bought the property, I knew absolutely nothing about prairies except some of the things Larry Allain had told me. So I joined the Cajun Prairie Restoration Society. I joined the Louisiana Native Plant Society. I started asking questions of the Cajun Prairie folks. I bought Malcolm's book, the yellow one that's out of print. And I went about trying to purchase prairie plants and prairie seed at local nurseries and could not find them. So a friend told me about Acadiana Native Plant Project and that June Walker was their propagating person, and so I joined and decided that we would grow our own prairie plants. So then we began disking the prairie. I looked at all the options of herbicide, which I was not comfortable with. So I lightly disked the prairie just to take off the weed layer in the project area. And then I created the cells that you saw in my design that are separated by paths. And then we maintain 10-foot paths along the property line because my neighbor is a pasture next door, but my neighbor is very loose with herbicide and oversprays regularly. So I wanted to give my prairie a buffer. Oh. So this is my property line, and this is the prairie, and you can see the forest in the background. So we maintain these and mow them, and this is what the prairie looks like now. This was in January compared to the green lawn that you saw earlier. So we started with seed. At LNPS, they have an auction every annual meeting, and I purchased seed from Mark Pasture. And then I also purchased seed from NUNUs, from Justin Fuselier, about 30 pounds of seed total, and we hand seeded. And then I also planted 4-inch pots that we grew at ANPP and cones from the UL Ecology Center. So here's just a small list of things that I planted by pots. And so I wasn't really sure what was in the seed mix because Mark Pasteur's bags had a lot of stems and things in them. It didn't have a list. So it was kind of a surprise to see what I would get. So for maintenance, we burn annually. This is probably the 4th year, and there was a lot of dry material for a really good fire. And then, oops, sorry. This is after the burn, and one of the problems we have with the prairie is, especially in the back wet part, there's a lot of vasy grass. It's a non-native invasive grass. And even after the burn, you can see the crowns of the vegetation. It doesn't get down into the crown to kill it. There are other grasses that are not particularly desirable, like smut grass, that have reacted to the burn well and that are going away. But this one is a problem. So I have in the front part of the prairie that's dry and higher, a really good restoration, a lot of species diversity, and in the back, we have this problem. So I did a slight comparison in the number of species and types of plants: grasses, sedges and reeds, annual herbaceous plants, perennial herbs, shrubs and trees. The trees, the only thing there is tallow trees that come in, and we take them out as soon as they come in. The shrubs are baccharis, and then we've planted hibiscus, different species of hibiscus and Kosteletskia. So we have a lot more species diversity in the project area, and there's a little bit of difference in the reference areas that we burn versus mowing. There's more herbaceous perennials in the mowed reference, and there's more grasses in the burned reference. So 5 years later, that's the gist of it. I'm still going to look at the diversity for a while longer, but I may want to just decide to let my reference areas become planted prairie so I can have more diversity. And for the large cells that are doing well, I'm happy with them, and I'm going to leave them as is, burning once a year. The cells that are not, that are full of vasy grass, I've already met with Steve Nevitt, and we're talking about different treatments that we can do to that prairie, to those parts of the prairie that we can try to get rid of that vasy grass. So that's the gist of my first 5 years. This is the prairie after it's been mowed and it's rained, and the ibis just stroll right through it and eat crawfish.
Thank you, Donna.
Thank
We're
you.
going to hold the questions.
So just a little bit of background. Apparently George Washington is credited with bringing lawns to this country. He was infatuated with the formal English garden. And in fact, he brought in English gardeners to help establish and then show him how to maintain lawns at Mount Vernon. Later on, Frederick Law Olmsted he incorporated lawns in some of the famous parks that he designed. Later on in this country, lawns became fashionable, and they were incorporated in many planned subdivisions. And the rest is history, as they say. Now, today we have about 40 million acres of lawn in this country, in the U.S. That's about the size of Texas. The problem is that these lawns are essentially biological deserts. Very little support for wildlife of any type. And they also require lots of inputs of things that aren't so good. They use a lot of energy. Here, every week, you have to mow your lawn. So that's a lot of fuel that we're using. Also inputs of fertilizer, herbicides, and other chemicals to give it that nice manicured look. So one option is to convert at least some of that lawn to a pocket prairie or a pollinator garden, and I'll use those terms interchangeably here. So you not only add beauty to what was a pretty drab-looking lawn, but you also create some habitat, valuable habitat for native species when you do this. So the first step, and I really I get a lot of teasing for this. I say to everybody who wants to put in a native garden is to have a plan. A plan is just essential, and so just same with the prairie or pocket prairie. So you can create your own plan. If you don't feel confident enough to do that, you can borrow one, and this is Donna Weifenbach's plan. You can download it from our website, or you can pay someone to do it. And even if you have to pay a few bucks to get somebody to design it for you, it is well worth it. Just take it from me. One of the things I want to point out before I move on from this image is each one of these colors represents a patch or a cluster of the same species, many individuals of the same species of a plant that goes there. And this is really an important attribute when you do a pollinator garden for a couple of reasons. One is that when that particular patch of a species blooms, it has much more visual impact than you're going to get if you had randomly dispersed individual species across the site. And also, it's helpful for the pollinators. When the patch is blooming, it helps them. They can find it more easily, and they can use the resources there more easily because all these plants are together in one patch. So another thing you need to do is select the plants that you're going to use. And you want plants that are going to have a long bloom time, so they'll be available for a relatively long time for pollinators. You also want to try to maximize the species diversity, and you're going to be limited because these are generally small areas, but put in as many species as you can. And also, you want species that bloom at different times during the growing season. And you can actually get enough, a wide variety of species, enough so that you have species flowering or different species flowering across the entire growing season, everything from early spring to late fall here. So one of the first steps you're going to do is you're going to remove the lawn. Now, you don't really have to do this. You can plug plants right into your lawn, but I think you'll get the best results and you'll get them much faster if you actually kill the lawn or remove it. And there are various methods to do that depending on how much physical activity you want to get into and how patient you are. If you're very impatient and you don't mind doing a little work, the fastest thing to do is to spade up the sod using a sharp shovel. You just remove the layer of sod, but you try not to go too deep. You want to go as shallow as possible, but yet get the roots. And it's fairly easy to do in, say, a St. Augustine lawn because the roots don't go very deep. Another method would be to smother the vegetation. You can use cardboard, plastic sheeting, visqueen, even a tarpaulin to just cover that lawn. Especially over the warmer season, it's going to really cook that vegetation and kill it. There are exceptions, though. If you have Bermuda, which is just a devil grass, you might have to keep it covered for a couple of growing seasons to get rid of it, or maybe even have to dig it out. It's really terrible. And of course, you can use 1 or 2 applications of herbicide, and that'll kill the vegetation. Once the the sod's gone, the grass is gone, then you need to implement your plan, and you first need to select the type of propagule you're going to use to plant the area. So that means, are you going to choose seeds, or maybe plugs, small plants and a plug, or container plants? You have those choices. Seeds will be the least expensive, but they're often difficult to obtain anywhere. And the other problem is that you have less control over the arrangement of plants within that garden. So I prefer using either plugs or container plants, and that way you can place those plants exactly where you want them. Then you go ahead and plant, and the best time to plant is right now, this time of the year. That gives these plants time to become established before the most stressful time for plants here is during the summertime. So by then, they should have become established, and they can handle that dry and hot period. So it's not over once you get the site planted. As you've heard many times before, you need to manage that through time once you get these plants in the ground, because things change. You have plants that invade or volunteer to your site, and you have to deal with that. So one of the best ways and the easiest way, if you can, is to burn it. Burn it once or twice a year. If wherever you are, you can't do that, you can mow it, and as Larry said, remove that material after it's mowed so that it doesn't become mulch and smother what you have there. Whether you use either one of these management techniques, think about the animals that are using that as habitat when you decide when to do it. For instance, that dead standing material in your bed, it may not be that aesthetically pleasing to you, but it's still being used during the wintertime. For instance, birds shelter in these standing dead vegetation. They also are consuming the seeds of these plants. There are also some native bees that overwinter in the dead stems of these plants. So it would be best, if you can, to wait until, say, February, say late January, February, before you actually do the burning and the mowing. Now, I know I've just blown through this really quickly, so I wanted to recommend this book, if I can find it. And everything I've said and much, much more is in this book. And I have a copy here. If you want to look at it, it's relatively inexpensive in paperback form. It's got a lot of great information about designing your own pollinator garden and lots of stuff. Anyway, thanks.
I'm Robbie Maxwell. I'm a fisheries biologist, aquatic ecologist by trade, I guess. I play with native plants in my free time, and I just tell people I fight losing battles. That's all I ever do. But it's really promising seeing everybody here. This warms my chilly heart to see, like, this is a win. This is a definite win for Prairies, so thank you all for coming. So I'm calling this Mowing Less and Growing More by converting chunks of wasted space into productive microcosms. Your lawn is a wasted space. My lawn was a wasted space. It's a microcosm because even if it is acreage, half acre, acres, it's just a small, small piece, a small mimicry of what there once was. And we're trying to recreate something of it that we can. I like to call it like a prairie museum. It's kind of what we have. It's a living museum. So about our house, we have a property with a house built in the 1940s. It's on 2.5 acres, about a hectare. It's right between Iowa and Lacassine, south of 90. So if you see the Bayou Rum Distillery, go a couple miles south. That's where we are. The actual property has an intact clay pan, which is extremely shallow, and it's never been tilled. They used to farm rice all around our house, out of this house. And they tilled all that land up. It's all pasture now for the most part. But they didn't till right around the house. So it's kind of virgin soil, which is unique. It floods a lot. About 5 months of the year, most of the yard is too wet to mow. We're in that kind of transition from a prairie, an upland prairie, to a marsh. We're somewhere in between there. You see the kids playing in it. This is what it looks like after 6 or 8 inches of rain. So I got tired of fighting that. So what do? I started out in 2012 noticing that we had wildflowers all over the yard in the spring. Coming from Texas, I knew that game of you let all the wildflowers bloom on the roadsides and then finally mow them once they've gone to seed. So I just started doing that. I just quit. I just didn't mow in the spring. I still don't. And we have the 3 big spring, wildflowers: butterweed, lyre-leaf sage, and a lot of fleabane. You can actually map out the topography of the yard by what's blooming where. So that's how we kind of started, just promoting just the wildflowers that were there. And then once it hits May or so, I mow them, and that is kind of mowed lawn. Where it started, the first half acre up in this northwestern edge of our property. This is our property between this tree line. This is what it looks like. I think that was probably about May. You can see the big patch of vasi grass I couldn't mow because it was too wet. I got sick of it. So what do? I talked to a lot of people. That's kind of what you're doing now. Don't take any one person's advice. I mean, Malcolm Badrine is my guru on this. You'll probably hear echoes of what he says and a lot of what I do. But I also talked to a lot of people, had people come out, just people I know, botanists, with different perspectives, and I made it fit what I can do and what I'm comfortable with and what fits our property. So this isn't for everybody. I know herbicides are controversial. If you want to talk about that later, let's do it. But I sprayed glyphosate, which is just Roundup, 3 times on this half acre. The 3 times is just like was alluded to earlier. I think Larry mentioned it. You want to get them before they go to seed. So every season for spring, summer, and early fall, I was spraying these plants as they were up and growing, but before they could reproduce, to get those weedy seeds out of here. And I also left a nice cover where I'm not losing soil and having problems there. During that time, I was hand collecting seeds. We have remnant prairies 5 or 10 minutes from the house, and I'd go anywhere up to maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours from the house to collect seed. But I don't work Fridays. So Friday is my day. I'd go out and collect seeds. One thing about collecting seeds, if you go to remnant prairies or anywhere, you can see what's blooming right now. File that in your brain. In a few weeks, that's what's going to be going to seed. So you can learn your seed identification, your seed head identification. All my seeds, I'd sit there, I'd clean them. These were beautiful, like commercial nursery level seeds that I was making. Because foolishly, I was cleaning every one, and I was measuring it, and weighing it, and categorizing. I ended up with over 100 species of seeds or seed groups that I could ID down to at least a genus. Part of that was also, I had an NRCS grant. One was an EQIP grant, so I got a few $100s. It was a lot of work, and it was like the hardest $400 I've probably ever made because it was a lot of paperwork. But I had to justify, and I spent a lot of my professional life doing backflips of justification to explain to people why we want to do things. I did it with them too because they wanted me to plant at really weird times. They wanted seeds from really weird places. And there were a lot of guidelines that I wasn't going to meet. So I was writing letters and justifying, and they ended up giving me the money, so I guess it worked. So keep records, keep notes, be ready to write letters. I did purchase 3 pounds of seed from Mark Pasture. He sent me 5. So I think in the end, it was 120, 150 species of seeds I put down. I also put down in this area, in this half acre, 75 plugs from remnants, specimen plants, potted plants, going to Malcolm's house, digging up a little gamma grass. I put 75 plugs in there, put an orange flag on it, and sprayed around it, and I didn't kill any of them with herbicide. So it can be done. December 1st, 2016, we planted. We harrowed before and after seeding. This harrow is just a really heavy, rough piece of metal that I could drag behind my lawnmower. We used some logic. I didn't map it out like the previous speakers. It's like, here's a higher area. And when I say higher, it's 2 inches higher than the next area. But here's a higher area, here's a lower area. We have a shady area with pecan trees, so I put a lot of inland sea oats back there, which do awesome in these shady areas. So we went around and did that. I don't think I put it in the slide, but 2 days later, I was at Tulane when a flood hit. So I rushed home. We had a north wind. A lot of the seed floated, thankfully, southwards. And we were out there a couple days later respreading a lot of seeds. But we still had good coverage. Just this harrowing in turned a lot of that seed in. It didn't go anywhere. So the first year, you can see it sprouting, that's probably January. This is a harsh environment. We got a rain event, there's another flood. This Atticus was 5 then. He was a big 5-year-old, but he's a 5-year-old. I mixed in a lot of annuals because otherwise a lot of these perennials are gonna be green the first year. You're just gonna get a lot of green, a lot of weedy stuff. This is actually from Native American seed in Texas. It's stuff that still pops up around my yard, but not here anymore. It's on the edges, it's in disturbed areas. Wildlife started showing up, like rough green snakes, and we got freakishly tall plants like that. That's an ashy sunflower, which if you ever see them in the wild, they're like that. But that one was a beast. It was taller than me and fell over because there's no root competition. They're shrinking now. My ashy sunflowers are like this now. Maintenance, like people talk about, burn December, January. I might try to bump it to February. We're fighting water out there though. So I've noticed a lot of times after the first of the year, it starts getting really wet and we get standing water and I won't get as good a burn. So I try to beat, when I see that, the moisture coming that's gonna stay for the next 4 or 5 months, I try to burn right before that. I might bump it a little bit this year. And I'm also only gonna burn one side of these trails. So we're gonna have kind of a comparison of the place that I've burned and not burned just to see how they react differently. Mowing and trimming paths. I love my electric hedge trimmer. I mow just a single pass with a riding lawnmower. And then if people come out or if I just get sick of it, I go through with the hedge trimmer and clear up the edges and you can get a nice corridor. And what I've started doing the past couple years is getting some native seeds. This is from Steve, that's from Justin Fuselier. After I burn, to recreate those processes that we don't have on a ½ acre or 2 acres with pastures all around us. Because you have to think in the past, bison, dogs, rats, birds, we're all moving seeds. The wind was moving seeds, floods was moving seeds. Every year these seeds were moving around. And like we talked about with changes in climate, dry times, wet times, you get different things growing in different areas. It's always kind of a pulse, it's moving. So to try to recreate that, I'm buying a pound or 2 of seed and just spreading it after I burn every year. And I have seen new species come up every year, so I guess I'm doing something right. 6 years we've been growing. These are just different parts, different times of the year. That's early spring. I do have a lot of irises, multiple types. They're all Louisiana irises, even the yellow ones. I've got the yellow Louisiana iris. But we get things going like cone flowers, pretty much passing off blooms throughout the year, different types. These are obedient plants. I think we have 5 types of obedient plants. So the bumblebees have a new obedient plant to go to every season. These are just different areas. Malcolm mentioned the goldenrod being a great pollinator plant, but this, the willow leaf aster, little purple aster that blooms in October, is a magnet. I'll show you another picture of that in a minute. And we expand. Every year I'm like, oh, I'm not doing anything this year. And then I end up doing something, killing more grass, killing more bad grass, putting more good grass in. Do topography manipulation. We dig out areas that are already low. This is a whole nother story. This is my mosquito control pond, and it's awesome. But we'll get into that some other day. Add a truckload of dirt to raise a little ground. Spot back here behind this, I call this my COVID pond, the mosquito pond, because I dug it during COVID out of frustration. This, I didn't herbicide any of that. I laid a little bit of sheet metal after Laura down. But this, going all back behind where this picture was taken, I've just seeded. I've been planting irises and some other plants, just plugs from around the yard, stems from around the yard. No herbicide touched any of this area, and I actually burned it last year. So I'm kind of gauging how quick they bounce into what I want them to look like, and nothing too rigorous or scientific, just kind of taking mental notes. But this, in the end, is what we've converted over the 2.5 acres. This is the original ½ acre. You can see the trails cut through it. Trails are extremely important. If you've got anything bigger than a small garden, be able to walk through it and enjoy it and be able to take through it, people through it. This is this area that I did 1 treatment on, and all this, the pond is over here. This is all wide open now. It's wet and wide open. Those water oaks that were this big around, they're not there to suck up water anymore. So it could stay wet if we ever get rain anymore. We're like 30 inches of rain short this year. So I think overall, we have about 1 acre planted. So dividends, it pays in dividends. We own a living property. Like, it's not just a habitat for us, it's a habitat for everything. If you want to come live at our house, not y'all, but if you're an animal and you want to come live there, you're good. we were tracking our biodiversity through iNaturalist. I have 2 projects because there's 2 different project types. It's Maxwell Micro Prairie. I really have more than 673 species, or I think it's more like 673 or 5 because they leave off some rare species that they don't want to show people where they are. But a quick breakdown, this is all way underestimated, except for the fish, because I know about those. 243 species of plants that we've seen on the property, 240 species of insects, which who knows how many orders of magnitude higher than that is, but I've never had an entomologist out, and I'm just winging it. Birds, every time birders come out, they notice more birds than I've ever seen or heard. So 63, 21 types of reptiles, and that's without even trying. We've had 14 types of snakes on the property, only 1 cottonmouth, and it was out of the irrigation ditch. We looked at each other a while. I walked away, it went away, and I've never seen it again. 14 species of fish. This is so exciting for a fish biologist. That male and female bowfin were in my ditch, and this irrigation ditch is knee deep. So every spring we run through with a backpack electrofisher and we count the fish. We had total fish kill after Laura, it bounced back. Amphibians, rare species. We have the parish record western milk snake, and there it is. Danielle came in one night and she went, the knot coral snake is in the carport. And I was like, and I stood there and looked at that thing. I've never seen a milk snake in the wild. So I was like, if I get bit by a coral snake, I'll never hear the end of this. So I was doing the rhyme backwards and forwards in my head. And I finally picked it up, and it is a milk snake. I'd seen milk snakes before, but never at anywhere I lived. So we published that during Hurricane Ida. I actually wrote up the manuscript, and that's published in Herp Review. Chicken turtles, which is an extremely rare turtle that a lot of people are trying to find and having problems with. Raccoon ate one in my yard because we found a freshly eaten one, so they're there. Buff-belly hummingbirds, we have them right now. I like to say him, I hope it's the same one, but 3 years in a row we've had a buff-belly hummingbird at the house. During the major migration in August, September, the ruby throats, you can sit on our porch and you'll see 60 hummingbirds or so at any one time right there on the porch. All over the property you can hear them. Because we feed them, but we also have attractors for them all over. So it's a major migration stopover. There's some monarchs on that willow leaf aster. That stuff, you have goldenrod blooming everywhere. You'll have 3 or 5 types of bees on the aster and that many types of butterflies and flies and wasps. They love willow leaf aster. Other things we do, we host lots of groups out there. If anybody ever wants to come out, you're definitely welcome to. I think like any of us that do this, I'm really happy walking around, showing you stuff, talking about it. Master Naturalists, we've had classes out there. We're very involved with the Southwest Louisiana Master Naturalists, so it's kind of our link that ties into a lot of this. We're on the Natural Areas Registry. It's, I think, the smallest property, but it's rare habitat. It's a plant or genetics bank for local genetics and genetics that work in these kinds of harsh environments. And it's an educational area, so that links to some of the criteria that they're looking for those. Happy to say we're a gold level certified habitat. We're that one right there. This is the most updated map that just got updated a day or two ago. Get on the map. Everybody in here should get on the map. And I also encourage you all to get on the Doug Tallamy's Homegrown National Park. There's a state ranking system, and if everybody, all 243 people that are in this program got on that, our state would skyrocket to like the front of the pack in the nation for native plantings. And finally, last year, Soggy Prairie Stalks and Seeds is what I call my little grow operation. All this paid for by selling plants. It was pretty much because I give a lot of plants away. I need to pay for dirt and pots, really, and a grow house. So I try to have them fairly cheap. I'm not in it to make money. I give away as many plants as I sell at the end of the day, I think. But standing offer is you come out to our house, anything you pluck, cut, dig out of the ground, you can have and take. But the second I put it in a pot, it'd be nice to have a couple dollars. But you can follow me on Facebook. Even if you don't have Facebook, that's where I advertise my stuff. I keep a plant list. On iNaturalist, it's us. That's my email. And that's it.
Thank you.
Was that 10 minutes?
All right, sorry I don't have a slideshow for y'all. I've been busy collecting seed for the fall, but I'm going to tell y'all a little bit about Saint-Luc and preparing for the garden there. I guess I'm going to reiterate a lot of the points that everybody made before. a plan is key. You have to have a plan, and you have to enact that plan purposefully. And as things change, you should talk to people that have experience, whether it be Larry or Malcolm or Lawrence or me or Donna or preferably all of us to get to develop a plan, because things will change as you go along. For example, Phyllis just acquired the grant to make the film project and plant this prairie in October. So we had to quickly develop a plan and try to implement it as best we could. We decided to plant about a 0.4 acre prairie in the back of Saint-Luc. And basically, the first thing you have to make a plan for is preparation. And preparation, I know people have said it a million times, but preparation is key. Because you can't go back and prepare and get rid of those weeds. If you don't get rid of the Bermuda grass or weeds, invasives you have beforehand, you'll be fighting those for years and years down the line, and you'll wish you had, and in some cases it can be worth just restarting if you don't get rid of those weeds beforehand. And like Larry said earlier, he's been preparing his prairie to plant all year, but he may not plant it because things just aren't perfect for him, and how successful those seedlings are going to be the next year. So it's really important to develop that plan. At Saint-Luc, the first thing we did was outline the planting area, mark the line clearly, because all the preparation and management, you need to have a clean margin so you don't have developed invasive weeds on the edge by accident. The first thing we decided to do was spray. We identified what grasses were there, so we had to select specific herbicides to kill those grasses. Bermuda grass was common in the area, and Bahia grass, so we used clethodim and Roundup plus triclopyr sprayed at a 2-week interval. So you can look up these grasses and look up research papers on what herbicides work best for which specific weeds you have, or you can call your NRCS agent and they could tell you what herbicides to use. And it's important to follow those directions. If you're going to do things like that, spend money, apply herbicide, you want to do that correctly. You don't want to harm things around or do things you don't, end up using this herbicide and not having the effect that you wanted. A lot of people don't like to use herbicides, and I completely understand and agree with everyone that herbicides are a bad thing for human health and the environment. But like Larry and Malcolm mentioned, in creating this restoration plan, you're trying to recreate conditions that no longer exist and haven't existed for hundreds of years. One of those conditions that has changed is the large amount of invasive weeds we have. And the subtropical environment we have some of the worst weeds in the entire prairie region of North America because we have high rainfall, good soil, and good climate for a lot of these tropical weeds. So in using herbicide, you can think of it as the last point in that previous paradigm, the last 100 years of using herbicide to manage your land. Maybe before your house was built on your land, it was a cow field or rice crop or soybeans. So those farmers used herbicide and tilling to get rid of all the native species that were there. And so maybe even though you haven't used a lot of herbicides at your home currently, your property has been under human management for a long time. So that last herbicide application can be the last. And if you do things right, that will be the last herbicide application on that piece of property, and will really pale in comparison to all the herbicide that's been used on your land previously. So giving the native plants the best chance that you can is really important. And so that's kind of the big point that I wanted to make. Preparation is key. And also want to mention unexpected management issues. One of the unexpected things we had happen at Saint-Luc was the landowner courteously added soil to the area because they, like anybody would think, you don't want low wet area to plant a new crop in, but what that did was cover up the Bermuda grass that was there already and prevented us from being able to spray or get rid of it in any way. So in the short time frame, we were trying to get things prepped for this fall to plant, and things just didn't work out perfectly. So we decided to postpone it till next year, to use this next year to prep appropriately to plant. And so I think that's a big thing that everybody should take away is if you want to plant next year, you need to start planting now and start preparing the site as soon as you can, really. Let's see, what else do I have to say about Saint-Luc? Just to touch a little bit more on the differences and trying to recreate an environment that prairie thrived in. The invasive species, the soil structure, and the lack of seed local nearby. So you can't just you can't plow and prepare it and expect it to grow back in prairie because there's no prairie seed next door. There's invasive weed seed next door. So you have to develop a plan that takes into account all these things in order to have a good, successful prairie planting. Like Larry mentioned, there are things you can do to mimic bison grazing once they're managed. High mowing or using cows to graze your prairie to mimic how prairie once existed in the past. You need to do things to mimic what conditions that prairie started in, and those were absent of invasive species. So that's pretty much what we did to prepare for Saint-Luc. Ideally, you need to use a combination of tilling and herbicide spraying because you have to till the soil in order to prepare the seed bed. So you can't just spray or you can't just plow, but just plowing requires slightly more intense management and watching the weeds you have growing to make sure that none of them set seed and reseed and you don't create a worse problem for yourself. So all of these things, it's a complex endeavor, but there's a lot of people here that can help you that have experience. So you can just ask for advice and then try for yourself, and you'll learn as you go, like everybody else did, basically.
Thank you. Thank you. Robbie, if y'all want to answer some questions, we have a few more minutes before we break for lunch. Y'all have any questions for any of them?
I want to know about the mosquito detention for winter pond.
Oh, the COVID pond, that was all built out of frustration. But really, so that back part of our lawn is one of the places that stays wet for 5 months a year, and now without the water oaks, suck that water out, it's going to be a beautiful Irish patch. Y'all come out in 2 or 3 years, it'll be amazing back there. But it holds water. And we always have mosquito fish, multiple fish. There's so many ways for fish to get in. Really, fish swim over that much water to get to new places. And they're swimming from our ditches or wherever, and they're inhabiting these areas. So we'll have fish all through this wet area of the yard, all throughout the spring, but then it dries up. But then we get a 6 or 8 inch rain event in the summer, which seems like it happens quite a bit. And it floods, and there are no predators out there for mosquitoes. There's no dragonfly larvae, there's no diving beetles, there's no mosquito fish. It's all just water out there. So mosquitoes go crazy because they're really fast. So what I do, I had to fill it up a few times this year, but really our clay pan, our soil is so heavy that there's no liner in that or anything. It's a couple feet deep and it holds water. And when it gets down to the actual pond, it'll be holding mosquito fish. And I'm keeping it full of water to keep that as a source population, so when I do get that 8 inches of rain in the summertime or whenever, and it all fleshed out, my predators, my inverts, my fish, they all can spread out in that wet area. We have not used, other than right after Hurricane Delta, that's the last time we used mosquito spray or thermocell at the house. We have an extremely vibrant predator population. I've been fighting Jeff Davis mosquito control for years because they will spray, and then 2 days later, I have an explosion of mosquitoes, and all my wandering dragonflies are dead and gone. That happened this year, and that was this year's angry letter, where I actually CC politicians, which I don't do that because people do that to me. But yeah, that's a mosquito pond. It's a source population of predators for when everything else floods and you get fish. Yeah.
We have a camp on the Cashew, about 35 acres, and the hurricanes really damaged the first part. The woods have come back, but the part where our camps are, it's still, it's all it is now is dog food. Like, just tons of it. And do we leave it?
Can you repeat
Yeah,
Connie's
can you-
question? After Hurricane
This is a good one for you.
Delta, or after one of the hurricanes, you lost a lot of trees on
Yes, our
the
tree,
camp,
our trees at
on the Calcasieu.
pretty
And that-
Yeah, and then it all came back, and all she sees right now is dog film,
The
which is that really
woods, the woods
cold.
came back, I don't know why, but the part that we had mowed and stuff and had camps, is dog food.
Yeah, so what would you do in that
Lots of
situation?
stuff.
Yeah, that's one of the issues of having new invasive weeds. So we have a different environment. So now that something different happened, maybe would have happened 30 years ago, and all these weed seeds are available, even though this is a native weed, it would be a difficult decision. You have to see the site. Sometimes some invasive weeds, or that we think are invasive, are native weeds that just grow up in after disturbance. And over time, they'll decrease as more longer-lived plants start to establish in the area. Sometimes it depends on the environment. If you see them decreasing, you can leave them. But if they still persist for a few years, you might need to go in and prepare the site and plant something else. Because there are some weeds that, especially in along rivers or soils, along areas with deeper soils. Other stuff like trees and brush can establish permanently. You don't have the drought effect that will kill them and allow prairie to take over. So in those kind of areas, you might need to encourage the plants that you want.